Zombie Reddit, today's story is...
My sister turned up pregnant and offered me her baby as a gift to adopt. After years of infertility, the truth behind her generosity destroyed my marriage. Hello, Reddit. The last few years have been an emotional roller coaster, and I felt I needed to share my story with you. My husband Alex, 34M, and I, Madeline, 31F, have been married for about 5 years. At first, everything seemed perfect. We had good jobs, a cozy apartment, and many plans for our future together. It seemed like we were living the dream, but life has a way of surprising us when we least expect it. For the past 3 years, we have been trying to have a baby without success. At first, we didn't worry too much. Everyone told us the same thing. Relax, don't stress, it will happen when it happens. We followed this advice to the letter. We stopped monitoring our cycles, we went on vacation to change our environment, and we tried to keep our relationship fun and light. But as the months went by without seeing a positive pregnancy test, that concern began to grow inside me. Eventually, we decided to see a doctor. We had all the usual tests done, and the results were completely normal. There was no obvious medical reason why we couldn't conceive. This turned out to be almost more frustrating than if they had found a specific problem, because it meant that we had no clear answers or a concrete plan. The doctors simply classified it as unexplained infertility and suggested that we continue trying naturally for a while longer. We tried again and again, and every month I allowed myself to get excited only to end up completely devastated when my period came. I began to obsess. Every sensation in my body made me wonder, could it be this time? I became a detective, monitoring my body temperature, doing ovulation tests, and checking fertility forums for clues. The process consumed me completely. Meanwhile, I wasn't the only one feeling the pressure. Alex, who had always been patient and understanding, also began to show clear signs of stress. I could see how much it affected him to see me devastated every month, and although he never said it directly, it was clear that he too was feeling the weight of the whole situation. Our intimacy began to turn into something mechanical, which only made things worse. After a year of unsuccessful attempts, we decided to take the next step. In vitro fertilization, IVF. We convinced ourselves that science was on our side and that this would work. I had heard so many stories of couples who, after years of struggle, managed to get pregnant with IVF on the first try. I clung to the idea that this would be our solution, but it wasn't. The first round of IVF was a brutal experience. The daily injections, the hormonal imbalances, the endless doctor's appointments. It was all extremely exhausting. My body was swollen, my emotions were out of control, and I felt trapped on a roller coaster that I couldn't stop. And after all that effort, the embryo transfer failed. It was absolutely devastating. I felt like my own body had betrayed me. Alex tried to stay strong for me, but I could see the sadness in his eyes. We didn't know what to do next. Should we try again? Take a break? Accept that maybe we weren't meant to be parents? After a few months of processing the failure, we decided to give it one more chance. We raised the necessary money, went through all the treatments again, and crossed our fingers. This time I promised myself not to get my hopes up, but of course I did. And once again, the transfer failed. At that point, I reached a level of despair that I didn't even know was possible. I felt completely empty, as if all joy had been extracted from within me. I began to avoid social contact and to dodge well-meaning relatives who would inevitably ask, "When are you two going to have children?" This situation was also affecting our marriage in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. Alex and I began to argue more frequently. They weren't big confrontations, just little tensions that built up over time. He hated seeing me so down, and I resented that he didn't seem to be as emotionally shattered as I was. In reality, he was suffering too, but he was just processing it differently. We tried therapy, which helped a little, but we were still in a kind of strange limbo. We weren't sure what our next step should be. Try another round of IVF? Consider adoption? Or just take a break from it all? About 6 months ago, things started to get strange. Looking back now, I don't understand how I didn't notice the changes before. Maybe I just didn't want to see them. Maybe I was so caught up in my own stress and disappointment that I ignored the signs in front of me. Alex had started to behave differently. Not openly suspicious at first, but enough for me to feel that something wasn't right. He started coming home later and later, always with some work-related excuse. Meetings, deadlines, last-minute projects, things that seemed reasonable at the time. But then, we stopped having intimacy altogether. This might not seem like a big problem for many couples who have been together for a while. But considering that we had been desperately trying to have a baby for 3 years, it was extremely unusual. It wasn't just that we weren't having sex, it was that he didn't even seem interested. Before, even when we were stressed, we at least tried. We had specific schedules, doctor-recommended windows in which we had to be together, and although sometimes it felt more like an obligation than something pleasurable, we did it because we wanted a baby. But suddenly, nothing. If I took the initiative, he would pull away or say he was too tired. After a while, I stopped trying because the constant rejection began to hurt me deeply. I convinced myself that he was simply exhausted. His job had been stressful, and after all we had been through, maybe he was emotionally drained. I understood perfectly. I too felt completely worn out. Even so, I tried to talk to him about it. I asked him if something was wrong, if he felt all right, if we needed to take a break from all the plans to have a baby and focus simply on our relationship. But he wouldn't open up to me. He kept insisting that everything was fine, that I was overanalyzing the situation. And then, without warning, my sister Abigail, 27F, appeared on my doorstep and blurted out the news that she was pregnant. I was completely shocked. I congratulated her because, well, that's what you do, right? Despite my own difficulties with infertility, I wasn't going to turn her moment into something about me. But before I could fully process it, she said something that left me completely baffled. She confessed that she didn't want the baby. She explained that it had been the result of a one-night stand, that the father wasn't part of the equation, and that she didn't feel ready to be a mother. And then she added something even more shocking. She was willing to give me the baby, just like that. I remember staring at her, my mind trying to process what she was saying. I had spent years trying unsuccessfully to have a baby, and now she was offering me one, as if it were a simple favor. I didn't know what to say. It was too much to take in all at once, too unexpected. I told her I needed time to think about it, that I had to talk it over with Alex. She seemed to understand, but made it clear that she needed an answer as soon as possible. That night, when Alex finally came home, I told him about the whole situation. I expected him to be as surprised as I was. I mean, I was still processing it, but his reaction was strangely intense. He wasn't just surprised, he was immediately opposed. He didn't even take a second to consider it. He rejected it outright, saying, "This is not what I want." I was stunned. I didn't expect him to agree right away, but at least I thought we could talk about it. This was a possible opportunity to finally have the baby we had been wanting for years. Sure, it wasn't how we had planned it, but life rarely goes according to plan. However, he didn't even want to discuss it. He remained firm, even dismissive, and when I persisted, he became defensive. He repeated phrases like, "I just don't want to do this," and "this isn't the right way." The more he avoided the conversation, the more I began to suspect that something else was going on. Over the next month, I kept trying to talk to him about it, but each conversation ended in frustration. He would either shut down completely or get irritated. It was as if he didn't even want to consider this as a possibility. Meanwhile, Abigail was constantly calling me, asking if I had made a decision. I didn't know what to tell her. I felt trapped between my desire to be a mother and my husband's outright refusal. As time went by, I began to feel that I didn't even know Alex anymore. His whole attitude had changed in ways I couldn't understand. It wasn't just about Abigail's offer. It was everything together. He was distant, reserved, and cold. He hardly spoke to me when I was at home, and when he did, it was with short, sharp answers. The warmth we used to share had completely disappeared. I started to question everything about our relationship. Then, one day, I received a text message from a friend that changed everything. She told me that she had seen Alex and Abigail together in a cafe. They weren't sitting like two people having a normal conversation. According to her, they looked too close and intimate. She had taken a photo and sent it to me. My hands were shaking when I opened the message. The image showed Alex and Abigail sitting at a small table in the corner of the cafe. He had his hand on hers, and they were leaning in close, as if sharing some intimate moment. It wasn't completely obvious they weren't kissing or anything like that, but it was enough to make my stomach turn. Enough to make me feel physically sick. At first, I refused to believe it. I stared at the image for what seemed like an eternity, trying to convince myself that it was all just a misunderstanding. Maybe they had bumped into each other by chance. Maybe Abigail had approached him to talk to him about the baby, and this was just an innocent conversation that happened to look compromising. But deep down, I knew. I had felt for some time that something wasn't right. This simply confirmed it. That night, when Alex came home, I confronted him directly. I held up my phone, showed him the picture, and asked him point blank what was going on. And you know what? He didn't even try to deny it. He just stood there, looking at me with a guilty expression, and said, "I'm sorry." I felt as if the ground had completely disappeared from under my feet. I demanded that he tell me the whole truth. I needed to hear it from his mouth. I needed him to admit what I already knew in my heart. And he did. He told me everything. He and Abigail had been having an affair, and the baby was his. I can't even find words to describe what I felt at that moment. Anger, disbelief, a pain so deep I could barely breathe. It wasn't just my husband who had betrayed me. It was my own sister, the person who was supposed to support me, the person who had been by my side through years of suffering while I struggled to have a baby. And all that time she had been having an affair with my husband, carrying his child in her womb. I completely lost control. I screamed, I cried, I threw whatever was closest to me. I don't even remember half of what I said, but I know that I ordered him to leave. I told him that I never wanted to see his face again. He tried to apologize, he tried to explain himself, but none of that mattered to me. There was no explanation that could repair what they had done. I threw him out of the house that same night. After he left, I just sat on the floor, staring at the wall, completely numb. It was as if my whole life had crumbled in an instant. The next few days were a blur. Alex kept calling and texting me, begging me to talk to him. He told me he loved me, that he had made a terrible mistake, that he had only done it because he couldn't take the pressure. He told me he had felt like a failure after all our difficulties with infertility, and that Abigail had been there to comfort him, and one thing led to another, as if that made it better, as if that justified what they had done. I ignored each of her messages. I didn't know what to say to Abigail either. She hadn't contacted me after I discovered the truth, and honestly, I didn't know if I could ever face her again. My own sister. The person who was supposed to be my family, who was supposed to support me unconditionally, had done this to me. I couldn't understand it. I had spent years crying over negative pregnancy tests, wondering why I couldn't have a baby. And all that time, my own sister had been sneaking around with my husband, and now she was carrying his child. I felt humiliated, stupid, as if everyone around me had been in on something that I was completely unaware of. I went over every moment in my mind, wondering how long this had been going on. Had it started when he first told me he was pregnant? Or before? Had they been laughing at me behind my back all this time? I barely ate. I barely slept. I just sat at home, surrounded by the memories of a life I thought I had, trying to understand how I was supposed to move on. But one thing was clear. I was definitely finished with both of them. But they hadn't finished with me. It would have been understandable if Abigail had simply accepted what she did and faced the consequences. But no, she actually had the audacity to come to me after everything that had happened and ask me to still adopt the baby. She wanted me to treat her as if she were a surrogate mother. She wanted me to act as if nothing had happened. She had been seeing my husband behind my back for who knows how long, and now she wanted me to simply forget all that betrayal and welcome her child, as if it were some kind of consolation prize twisted by all the suffering they had caused me. I laughed when he first mentioned it. I thought he was joking, but he was completely serious. He stood there in front of me with a frustrated expression on his face, saying things like, "You wanted a baby, didn't you? Well, here's your chance to be a mother." As if that was the real problem. As if the problem was simply getting a baby, and not the fact that this child was the result of the deepest betrayal I had ever suffered in my life. I said no, and she didn't take it well at all. Suddenly, I was the villain of the story. Suddenly, I was the selfish one. She acted as if I was being cruel, by refusing to accept the child that was conceived through the worst betrayal imaginable. She went straight to talk to our parents, probably hoping they would take her side, but to my absolute relief, they rejected her immediately. They told her that she needed to take responsibility for her actions, that she had made her own choices and now she had to live with the consequences. They weren't going to protect her or make excuses for what she had done. That should have been the end of it, but things got even worse because Alex also decided that he wasn't going to take responsibility for his actions. He was willing to pay child support because, legally, he had to, but that was it. He told Abigail straight out that he wouldn't be part of the baby's life, that he didn't want to take on the role of father, that she was completely on her own. I know he's a complete bastard. This man destroyed our marriage, he betrayed my trust, he got my sister pregnant, and then, when it all fell apart, he just walked away as if none of it mattered to him at all. And suddenly, Abigail wasn't so arrogant anymore. She wasn't acting like she was in control of the situation anymore. She no longer came to me telling me to just take the baby and pretending she had the upper hand in this situation. No. Now she cried to me, telling me how difficult it would be to be a single mother, how she didn't know what to do, how she didn't think she could raise this baby alone. And I'm not gonna lie, I felt a certain satisfaction. Does that make me a bad person? Maybe, but I don't care. For months I had been drowning in grief. I had spent years trying to have a baby, breaking my heart over and over again every time a pregnancy test came back negative, and all that time my own sister had been seeing my husband, getting pregnant with the baby I wanted so much, and now she wanted me to feel sorry for her? No, absolutely not. I wasn't going to console her. I wasn't going to make her feel better about the disaster she had created. She had made her choices, and now she had to face the consequences. She kept trying to get in touch with me after that, but I completely ignored her. I also blocked Alex's number. I didn't want anything to do with either of them. I was definitely done with this situation. But then my mother informed me that Abigail has decided to give her baby up for adoption, and now I don't know what to think. It's not the baby's fault. I really want to be a mother, with or without Alex. I have a good job, so I know I'll be able to take care of the baby financially. Any suggestions? Update 1. Hello everyone. It's been about 2 months since my original post, and honestly, I didn't expect it to generate so much response. I just needed to vent, but reading all your comments and support has really helped me enormously. It made me feel less alone in the situation, and I can't thank you all enough. I have some updates to share, but first I want to clarify a few things. Many people asked if I feel hatred towards Abigail's baby, or if I blame the child for what happened. The answer is no, definitely not. I bear no grudge against that baby. None of this is that child's fault, and I fully understand that, but that doesn't mean I want to adopt him. For a brief moment, I did consider the possibility. Not because I thought it was a good idea, but because Abigail kept putting constant pressure on me. She made me feel as if I was being cruel by refusing, as if I were wasting my chance to become a mother. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how crazy the idea was. How could I raise that child without constantly being reminded of the betrayal? What if every time I looked at the baby, all I could think about was what they had done? What if, without meaning to, I ended up developing resentment towards an innocent? That wouldn't be fair to me or to the baby. So I made my final decision. I'm not going to adopt Abigail's child. I feel much calmer now that I've made this decision. As for the rest of the news, Alex finally removed all his belongings from the house. It took longer than I would have liked, but at least he's no longer here. I have no idea where he's currently living, and frankly, I don't care to know. At first, he kept trying to get in touch with me, begging me to forgive him, saying he'd made a mistake and that he still loved me, and all that stuff, but I completely ignored every message until he finally gave up. However, now I face new problems. Since Alex disappeared from my life, Abigail has been constantly harassing me. She hasn't stopped bothering me for a single day. At first, it was just text messages and calls, asking if I had heard from Alex, if I knew where he was, if I could help her locate him. I initially ignored her, thinking she would take the hint, but she didn't. She started turning up at my door. Every other day, she would ring the bell and stand outside as if I had some obligation towards her. Sometimes I would open the door just to tell her to go away. Other times I wouldn't even bother to answer, but she just wouldn't give up. She kept insisting and begging. On one occasion, she stood there crying, saying that she was going to be a single mother and that she didn't know what to do, that Alex was abandoning her just as he had abandoned me, that she desperately needed my help. I almost laughed in her face. I told her as calmly as I could that she needed to solve her problems herself, that she had made her own decisions and now she had to live with the consequences. I made it clear to her that our relationship was definitely over. She didn't take it well at all. She yelled at me, said I was a heartless person, that I was enjoying seeing her suffer, and you know what? Maybe a small part of me does feel a certain satisfaction, not because I wanted to see her suffer, but because she deserved to face the consequences of her actions. This is her problem to solve, not mine. She has not stopped turning up at my house, but at this point, I simply ignore her completely. I don't open the door. I don't get involved in any way. I have blocked her number, and I am seriously considering changing my locks in case she has any ideas about breaking in. Update 2. Hi everyone. I know it's only been a week since my last update, but things have taken another unexpected turn and I just have to share it. It turns out that Abigail was already seeing someone when she started her affair with my husband. I found out about this from my mother, who mentioned it casually during a conversation, as if it were just another piece of gossip. She told me that Abigail had a boyfriend, or at least someone she was in a relationship with, and that this man apparently had no idea that she was cheating on him with Alex. I have no idea who he is because my mother didn't mention his name, but from what she told me, he was not at all happy when he found out that Abigail was pregnant. He showed up demanding a paternity test. At first, Abigail flatly refused. She insisted that she knew for sure that the baby was Alex's, and that there was no point in doing any test, but this man did not give in. He kept pressing her, telling her that if she really had nothing to hide, she would simply agree to take the test. She finally gave in. The test came back negative, confirming that the baby was not his. I can't even imagine what that moment must have been like for him. Imagine thinking you might become parents, insisting on a paternity test, and then discovering that not only is the baby not yours, but the woman you were having a relationship with was cheating on you with her sister's husband. It's too much chaos concentrated in a single situation. I don't know all the details, but I guess you ended the relationship after that, and honestly, you did the right thing. You deserve much better. Besides, Abigail had finally crossed all my boundaries and I had to take drastic measures. A few days ago, she showed up at my door again. By now, I was completely fed up with her behavior. She had already ruined my marriage, she had turned my whole life upside down, and she still had the nerve to show up at my house acting like I owed her something. So I called the police. I didn't even give her a warning this time, I just picked up the phone and made the call. When the officers arrived, she tried to play the victim as usual. She explained to them that she was just trying to talk to her sister, that she wasn't trying to cause trouble, and that she was desperate and needed my help. But the police weren't convinced by her story. They clearly warned her that she couldn't come to my house uninvited, and that if she continued to harass me, there would be legal consequences. I think she finally understood the gravity of the situation, because she hasn't reappeared since. For the first time in months, I don't have to listen to her banging on my door, begging me to fix the mess she created. I don't have to put up with his fake sob story, or deal with his attempts to manipulate me into raising his child. Honestly, this whole situation has been completely insane from start to finish, but I think I'm finally seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Alex is gone. Abigail is out of my life, hopefully for good. And I'm finally starting to heal. Update 3. Hi everyone, it's been almost 7 months since my last update, and honestly I didn't think I'd be writing here again. I thought things had finally settled down, that the chaos was behind me, but as often happens, life had other plans for me. A few months ago, Abigail gave birth to a baby girl, my niece. One day she left the baby at my parents' house, saying she needed to run some errands. My parents, suspecting nothing strange, looked after the little girl while they waited for her to return, but she never came back. At first, they thought that maybe she was just late, maybe she had lost track of time, maybe something unexpected had come up. But the hours turned into a full day, and then 2, and finally 3. They called her repeatedly but got no answer. They went to her apartment and found it completely empty. They contacted her friends, but no one had seen her. Eventually, they filed a missing persons report, but deep down, I think even they knew the truth. Abigail wasn't missing, she'd just run away. She just left. She didn't even have the decency to leave a note explaining why. Not a single message, no explanation, she just disappeared. Who does something like that? I mean, I knew she was selfish, I knew she was irresponsible, but abandoning her newborn baby without a word, she just disappeared. Who does something like that? I mean, I knew she was selfish, I knew she was irresponsible, but abandoning her newborn baby without a word, that's a whole new level of terrible. Despite everything, my parents have taken responsibility without hesitation. For now, they are taking care of the little one. They didn't think twice. They just did what had to be done. I have visited my niece several times since then, and although I don't want to be her mother, there is one thing I know for sure. I will be an excellent aunt to her. This child deserves much more than the people who brought her into the world. She deserves to be loved unconditionally. Alex has been conspicuous by his total absence. I don't even know if he is aware that Abigail has left. If he is, he obviously doesn't care at all. He made it perfectly clear from the start that he wanted no part of this baby's life. And as much as that deeply saddens me, it may be the best thing for the child. The last thing she needs is a father who sees her as a burden and not a gift. The only contact I had with him was when I called him to ask for his address so I could send him the divorce papers. He signed them without putting up any resistance. I didn't ask for anything in the agreement. The house was already in my name. My parents are sorting out all the legal aspects of the situation. They are in constant communication with a lawyer to determine what procedures should be followed. They have discussed the possibility of formally adopting the little girl, but I don't know if they have made a final decision on the matter. As for me, I'm just taking it one day at a time. I'm still healing from everything that's happened. I'm still trying to rebuild my life after the disaster that was my marriage, but I'm in a much better place than I was a year ago. Thank you all for listening. Your support has meant more to me than words can express.